It was not swords or spears. It was not cannons. The force that shook an entire continent was so small that the human eye could not see it. For centuries, an invisible invader moved silently alongside exploration expeditions, slipping into cities, villages, and tribal communities. It made no sound and left no battlefields behind, yet its consequences were more terrifying than many wars. That force was smallpox, a disease that changed the course of human history. In the early 16th century, when ships from Europe reached the Americas, they carried ambitions of conquest, treasure, and superior military technology. At the same time, they unknowingly carried something far more dangerous than any weapon. They brought infectious agents from the Old World. For indigenous peoples of the New World, smallpox was completely unfamiliar. Their bodies had never encountered this virus before, meaning they had no natural defense. A single infected individual entering a community was enough to trigger a chain of transmission that spread like an uncontrollable biological storm. Over the following decades, the disaster expanded at a staggering pace. Once thriving cities of the Aztec, Inca, and many other indigenous civilizations gradually fell silent. Ceremonial plazas, marketplaces, and residential areas turned into empty spaces marked only by time. Some historical records estimate that in many regions, more than half of the indigenous population disappeared in a short period. For European conquerors, direct conflict was often unnecessary. Their opponents were already weakened by disease. Smallpox became an invisible ally that shifted the balance of power and opened the path to the collapse of ancient civilizations. Behind the cold statistics were stories that history rarely tells in full. As the biological wave spread, children suffered the most. Their young bodies were unprepared to face a threat that had never existed in their lands. Within weeks, children who once played in plazas, along riverbanks, and in village courtyards vanished from daily life. Laughter faded and was replaced by a heavy silence across settlements. In many tribes, adults later recalled mornings when they woke up and no longer heard children calling for their parents. Small huts remained closed for days. Communal spaces stood empty, not because people had left their homes, but because too many lives had ended. Within a few seasons, an entire future generation was erased from the flow of time, leaving a void nothing could replace. Those who survived were not truly free from the aftermath. Deep marks remained on their faces, like living records of tragedy. Skin changed, features were altered, and eyes carried memories that could not be erased. Each time they looked at their reflection, they saw not only themselves, but also the painful past they had endured. For many, these scars became lifelong reminders of the day their world collapsed. In Europe and the Americas during the 18th century, people who had survived smallpox often faced social distance, not because they were still a threat, but because their appearance revived collective fear. At gatherings, many were avoided. In marriage and employment, they faced obstacles simply because history had left its mark on their faces. They survived, but carried a psychological burden few could truly understand. What makes this story even more unsettling is that at certain points in history, disease did not spread only by accident. Some records suggest that infected items, such as blankets, clothing, or personal belongings, were deliberately distributed to weaken opposing communities. These were not battles fought on open fields, but silent confrontations where the attacker did not need to appear in person. These events have led historians to ask a deeply controversial question. Was smallpox merely a natural disaster beyond human control, or was it at times turned into a strategic tool in early modern conflicts? While the answer remains complex, one truth cannot be denied. The consequences went far beyond expectations. Smallpox did not only change individual lives, it rewrote the history of entire civilizations. Over time, humanity eventually found ways to control this threat through vaccination and medical progress. Smallpox was pushed back and ultimately eliminated. Yet its legacy remains a powerful warning. It reshaped population maps, altered global power structures, and created cultural voids that can never be filled. An invisible organism proved capable of rewriting the fate of millions simply by existing and spreading. The story of smallpox reminds us of a sobering truth. The most dangerous threats often have no form, no sound, and no borders. They cross oceans, travel with humans, and change history within a few generations. That is why, when we look back at the past, we must study not only empires and wars, but also the invisible forces that once shook the entire world.